Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Local Influencers Podcast. I'm your host, Abel, and today I am joined by Laura of Laura's Cupcakery. Laura, thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so Laura and I have had to reschedule a couple of times because of life, but we are finally here and it feels so good on this Sunday afternoon as we're recording at least. Laura, I just would like to kind of jump right in if you don't mind and ask, how long have you been interested or in this, I would say, baked goods business?
So I started baking and kind of messing around with baked goods probably around the time I was 15, 16. And then from there, it just kind of grew into a passion. To be honest, initially, I could not bake a cake to save my life. When I got started, my grandma did all of the baking for me. If I wanted to decorate a cake, I would call her up and say, "Can you bake this, this, and this, and I'll come by and pick it up." um, Eventually I learned. She kind of said, okay, enough's enough. But so now I bake and I decorate, but my real passion is for the decorating. That's the part that I enjoy.
Yeah, I have talked to a lot of people. I believe I've talked to someone who does similar baked goods as well, but everyone has their own take on it. And I always find it's always weird because in a lot of these podcasts that I've done, in some way or another, it's a form of art, whether it's designing cakes or baked goods and writing or public speaking, or I've even spoke to a couple of musicians, drag artists. And so it always amazes me that there's so many I like to say creators in the coastal bend that people don't even realize, right? We all know, like, if you wanted cake back in the day, or at least even some people don't know, some of our listeners might know that there are people like you, small businesses that do this. Everyone's like, oh, just go to HEB or Walmart and get a cake, box cake, right? And although those are good for like quick, I need a quick, whatever, I think that looking at your page, you don't get that customization, that attention to detail, and looking at your Instagram specifically, I can tell that you do put a lot of like love and effort into your work. So, with that being said, what made you? Obviously, your name's Laura. And were you just like, you know what, Laura's Cupcakery, like that's it? Or did you play around with a few names?
We did. I think that we played around with a lot of things. Initially, when I first started to think of it, I was kind of set on doing Laura's Cupcakes and More, because I worry with the Cupcakery, we don't only do cupcakes. So I kind of wanted something to encompass everything. But then realistically, that was just kind of long. So we shortened it up and did the Cupcakery. And it just kind of stuck.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I have noticed, like right away when I saw the name, right, for your Instagram. I'm like, oh, okay, cupcakes. But then the cupcakery part gets me, so I'm like, well, that kind of speaks to itself. That is a little bit more. I see you do like cake pops and obviously cakes and stuff. Out of all the things that you do, what is one of your favorite? I know you said designing and like the kind of creating it is like art decorating is your favorite, but out of all the, cakes, cake pops, cupcakes, what is your favorite to do?
I would say wedding cakes. I really like the simplicity of them, but that I get to add a little flair to each one. And I like it even more when my clients give me creative freedom. I think that kind of lets me do my own thing. And I feel like my work is a lot better when I have that freedom.
Cool. And what would you say is your least favorite thing to do?
Cookies.
A lot of people I know, like I know people that I haven't interviewed, just I have friends that actually do baking and they tell me the same thing.
And in fact, until maybe 6 months ago, I did not offer cookies. Friends and family always told me, why don't you do cookies? You do, really great work on cakes. And again, like I started off with the cakes. I could not bake a cookie to save my life. Um, and I've finally learned, and I even tell my sister and my husband all the time, I don't like doing cookies. They're like, but they're so pretty and they taste so good. So I I do it. But it's definitely not my favorite.
Yeah, a lot of people, like I said, have said that I know, and it's funny because I kind of knew, like, going into asking that question, I was like, I bet she's gonna say cookies because everyone's like, I hate cookies. And so when someone orders, like you said, like creative freedom, right? That you like when someone gives you creative freedom. When someone places an order with you for whether it's like a birthday cake, just like, hey, this is kind of the ideas or color scheme that I want, go ahead and do it. What, like, let's say if I told you that, like, let's say like, hey, I kind of, like my backdrop, like, I kind of want this kind of color scheme. How do you pull inspiration? Do you have like a form that someone has to fill out to kind of give you more of ideas? What does the process of that look like submitting an order with you?
So I'm big on making all of my orders like verbal. And then I'll usually send a follow-up email or text or something just so I kind of make sure that all the details are correct. But I really like to talk to my customers just because I feel like so much can get lost in translation over email or text. So I really want to hear from them what they're going for. And usually I'll tell them, tell me everything you want, tell me what your ideas are, and give me some time. Give me some time to think about a design, think about the different options, the different sizes of cakes. And, I'll get their information like how many servings they need, that sort of thing. But then I kind of like to take my time and get back with them on a design so that I'm not rushed and really throwing it together. I have that time to figure out what's going to look best.
So if one of our listeners was going to order, let's say a wedding cake from you, how far in advance would you like that order to be placed? Just because, like you said, you would like to have time to kind of come up with an idea and concept and all of that.
Right. So typically, at least 2 or 3 months for a wedding cake, if if not longer. I have a lot of weekends that book up really quickly, especially now with a lot of our 2020 weddings that got canceled and are rescheduled. I think this year I've made more wedding cakes than I've ever made. So, which
Oh,
is a
that's
true blessing. It is, I mean, a
for
blessing that
sure.
these people are getting their opportunity to reschedule and celebrate. Um, but definitely, if you're set on ordering something from me, get with me as soon as you know. That way I can make sure I have room in the schedule. Sometimes I do, sometimes I can take um, orders, a week or two ahead of time, but it really depends on what I've got booked already.
Cool. And so when is it just you doing this alone, or do you have help? Is there someone helping you? Do you have a staff, a team of any kind, or is it just strictly you doing all of
It
these
is,
things?
it's mainly me, and I have my husband who is a godsend. Anything I ask, he will do. And he's slowly getting more into the more detailed things. We recently started doing markets, so that was kind of crazy initially because I had a full schedule of cakes and orders, and then I decided let's get out there in the community and do more, more face-to-face stuff. So I was like, okay, you're gonna have to do these. I need these little Minnie Mouse molded pieces. So just put the stuff in the mold. And he's like, what? No. But I mean, he is my number one supporter and always like down to do whatever I ask. So he's a huge help.
I love that. And I know that you said that your least favorite thing to do was cookies. What was one of the hardest things for you to kind of grab to perfect? Like you were like, oh, like you scrapped, 10, 12 cakes or cupcakes, whatever it is. What was the hardest thing for you to kind of get the hang of?
I would say the cookies.
Mm.
Traditionally, a lot of bakers offer royal iced. cookies. And I've tried for years to do that, and it is not my forte. I cannot, I can pipe things on cakes and they will come out great. I don't know what it is about cookies. So when I started doing cookies, I started doing fondant cookies because that's something I was more comfortable with. I do it on cakes all the time. I use different cutters and things like that. So they're not traditional. I kind of had to switch that up. But I would say that that was the most difficult to kind of figure that out, because a lot of people, there's not a lot of information out there on the fondant topped cookies. It's not something you see here in America. A lot of artists overseas, like in Europe, do a lot of the fondant cookies, but not here. So like finding cutters and things like that is hard. I kind of have to make them on my own. But I think that now that I've got the hang of it, there's a lot of room to expand in that.
Cool. And okay, so this is probably a little bit of controversial question. However, I do like to ask because besides podcasting, I do write books, right? I am an author, and the price of my books is always a problem. People are always like, your friends and family want that friends and family discount, right? But my friends and family didn't give me that friends and family input into my work.
Right.
So what is your personal take on, I always see it like on Etsy shops and things where people are like, oh my God, you're charging this amount for a dozen of this or X, Y, and Z. Do you have an opinion? Can you explain to the listeners why custom items, custom pieces of work may cost more than getting a pack of Oreo cookies,
Right. So it's the time involved. I mean, I can sit down to make 12 cookies and it's going to take me at least 2 or 3 hours. And that's after I've spent the time baking, cooling. It really is about the time. You're like when you go to a grocery store and buy a cake. Yes, they take the time to ice it and all of that, but most of it's pre-made, like they have pre-made icing. Everything that I do is from scratch. I don't use box mixes. I don't use pre-made icings. It's all, it's all made here. So it's a long process. Like for a wedding cake, it takes me 2-3 days to even get to the point where I'm going to start decorating the cake. I'm going to bake it. I'm going to cool it. Most of my cakes cool overnight so that they're firm and I can stack them, ice them. They go in the fridge. I pull them out. I put a second layer of icing on them, and then I get to start to decorate them. So it's the time that is involved. It's very time consuming.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't get that because you've mentioned all of that, but people also don't mention the consultation time, right?
Right.
That's a part of your day. The planning piece, like after your consultation, it's like, okay, they told me they want this. How am I going to do this? And what do I need to get this done?
And then also in that is like the business aspect of it. Like you said before, it's just me. So I'm the one doing invoicing. I'm doing, ordering supplies. For like the whole business concept is extremely time consuming. And then just making sure that we have everything that we need. My husband is constantly running out to H-E-B or Walmart at 10 o'clock at night, oh my gosh, I forgot a cake board, that sort of thing. So it's a big process.
For sure. And then, like you said, adding on to that business piece, right? Marketing yourself, marketing your what I hate when people say my brand, but everyone, whether you have a small business or you're a content creator, you are a walking brand of your, and so you have to market yourself, you market your brand, right? That takes a lot. Like I have a podcast, right? A network with, I think, going on 8 or 9 podcasts there. and then I write, and I have a full, that's not even, this is not my full-time job. I wish it was, but it's not. And I have a full-time job and I do all of this. Like I was off these last 3 days and I've been up from, I think like 9 a.m. till 3 a.m. the past 3 days getting things done. So people don't see behind the scenes. And I'm sure you've had days like that as well, you know, where like you love what you're doing. So in the moment, you don't feel exhausted or tired. But afterwards, you're like, did I really just spend X amount of time on that?
Sometimes I look at the clock and I'm like, how is it 3 a.m.? My gosh.
I
It's
know. I know, and it goes by so fast for me because I'll have random like YouTube videos playing or like podcasts playing while I'm doing my work. A lot of my work right now is like either recording, writing, or scheduling Instagram posts. People don't realize, like I said, marketing yourself. It'd be great if you could just sell your cakes and
right,
your all
right.
your products, your baked goods, but you have to promote them because if not, word of mouth will only get you so far.
Exactly.
And so people don't see that. And so for our listeners that have ever left a comment on anyone's page saying, oh my God, that's overpriced, like, oh my God, help us then. Like, come and help
Yes.
us and you'll see. So right now, are you currently doing this like out of a home, out of a shared space? And if you are, do you have plans to maybe in the future hope to do a brick and mortar? What are your future plans for Laura's Cupcakery?
So right now we are home based, and we've been home based since 2013. To kind of give a little bit of a backstory, before that time, it was not legal to sell cakes out of your home. Um, Lots of people did it anyway because I don't know. I think a lot of people didn't know. Like there wasn't a law saying you can do this. So at that time, we worked with several people online that we met through like cake pages and things like that. And they wrote legislation and we lobbied for it to be passed. And as soon as it was passed, like we were able to establish the DBA and that sort of thing. So we've been home based since that point. I get asked a lot, is there a brick and mortar place in the future? And I don't know really because I enjoy being at home. Like I said, the cakes are such a process. Like I'm able to bake them and put them in the fridge and then get my daughter up from nap or wash the dishes, that sort of thing. And at this point in my life, I can't imagine being away from the home for that point, like for that long of a time. So it's really, I think right now, most convenient for me to be here. Um, Sometimes I look around and I'm like, the bakery's taking over. We don't have a house. But I like the convenience of, like I said, I can work until 3 in the morning, put the kids to bed, work, and then, just go to bed as soon as I can. So right now, I think home is where we need to be. But definitely, if it works out in the future, I could see us having, a brick and mortar place.
Yeah, and I imagine I imagine it's hard for any business because I guess once you get a brick and mortar, they also probably get staff eventually.
Mhm.
Um, but like if it's just you and your husband, I can't imagine you both being at the business till like we said, late 3 a.m., right? And that takes a lot. And so I know earlier you mentioned how last year a lot of weddings were canceled. You know, COVID came with like a vengeance and like just shook all of us, right? Like the way we live, the way we do things. How did that affect your business? And did it even affect your business? And I know now you're starting to, kind of see an increase in orders, an increase of business because a lot of it was pushed to this year.
Mhm.
But how did that affect you? And were you kind of like freaking out? Because I've talked to a lot of small business owners and they had to kind of come up with other creative ideas to keep their businesses afloat. So how did that affect you?
So I was very lucky at the time when COVID was at its worst. I was working full time. So the cupcakery wasn't our main source of income. But we did have a lot of weddings cancel. And with those, I contract with wedding planners. So the contracts with those cakes were a little different. So they were just cancellations, like not, we keep the deposit. It was just probably for about 4 or 5 months, there was nothing. There were no cakes to be made. But I will say, probably, 5 months in, I started getting more calls. I think a lot of the local bakeries weren't taking short notice orders. So I was getting a lot more calls then, but I did have to tweak the fact that most of the time I wouldn't offer small cakes. It's really hard for me to get in the kitchen and make a cake to feed 10 people because I'm used to making, wedding cakes that feed 100 to 200 people. So I had to start offering smaller sizes, tweaking my pricing because it's just not something that I was used to. But people weren't able to have events for 100 people. They needed these small birthday cakes. So that was different. That was really different for me. Offering, the smaller, I've done this past year, I don't know, I've done just like tiny cakes and I never thought I would do it, but it's been fun. It's been challenging, but fun.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you were able, like it didn't, like you had that full-time job
Right.
because,
Yeah, that was a truly
kind of
good
impact.
thing. I know a lot of our small businesses locally really did struggle. I couldn't imagine being in that situation where, this was our main source of income. It would have been really tough.
Yeah, for sure. So, with all of that being said, now is the time for you to kind of plug your social media networks, profiles, anywhere people can find you. And if they would like to maybe book a cake with you or some kind of baked goods, maybe give a phone number if you have a business phone or anything, email. Now's the time to do that.
Sure. So we are on Instagram and Facebook. You can message us on either. We under Laura's Cupcakery. And then for the email, it is cupcakes2214 at Gmail. And then our phone number is 361-246-9802. And we can be reached at any of those. If you're interested in placing an order, it is important to send like the number of servings you're wanting, the date, so that, initially we can check to see if that's available and then kind of go from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Laura. I will have all of that information in the show notes. So all you'll have to do is click on the links, and that will take you directly to Laura's Cupcakery Facebook and Instagram pages, and you'll be able to contact Laura via those options as well. Just very easy for you all. Thank you so much again, Laura, for being here. I really appreciate your time, and it was nice chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Good. Yeah, for sure. Thanks. And for everyone listening, wherever you are listening, please head out into your community and do something good, make a positive change, and just be a great person. Have a great day.